In our project, we were kind of episodic rather than focused. But one of the key issues that we were struck by is, I suppose, the anecdotal evidence or concern with ghost estates and this issue about rural housing not being sustainable going forward, either in terms of the market and that it's not selling, or in terms of the fact that people are stuck in isolated locations that were that are accessible only by car, and that largely that there's little hope of sustaining local communities in that sort of area. Again, anecdotally, these locations are within those huge development zones where all of the boom of housing was happening during the last 10 years. And we felt that one of the issues about this was possibly to support the idea of community by something like the Transition Towns network, where community initiatives aim to enforce the local economy and to break the connection with fossil fuel, making them energy self-sufficient through community initiatives and community action, with very small funding required from local government. In a number of areas, particularly in Kenmare, they've trialled local currencies, which have the benefits of keeping the money in the locality. It's much harder for it to spread out if it's only legal tender within a very small area. It also assists microfinancing and allows the people running the scheme to make decisions about how finance can be given out, rather than it being set by large financial institutions that have possibly investors to placate. The other issue about these areas, as I said, was that a lot of them are quite isolated, so perhaps establishing better transport routes, free connections between them, and alternatives to the car as means of transport in and around these routes could start to get synergies going between areas that are blighted by this development and where they have very, very low population densities themselves. If those populations are connected, they can start to establish synergies and the kind of numbers that are required to make things happen, to create business opportunities, and to have a sense of community or a sense of identity. The other issue in these areas is that there are vast numbers or large number of houses that are unsold. The numbers are disputed, I suppose you could say, with the CIF pitching it around 35,000, whereas people like Connor Skean are making predictions of over 200,000 units as being vacant. The danger, I suppose, with these is that over time they start to lose their value, both intrinsic value as well as market value, if they can't be sold, and that they start to degrade and that they require maintenance and upkeeping, which isn't a viable proposition if there's no return coming. So in England last year, an enterprising car salesman who wasn't selling the cars that he'd discounted to half price decided that he'd sell two for the price of one, and he got rid of all of his stock within a week. So perhaps a situation where existing people who have the unfortunates who have purchased houses in some of these estates can be given the one next door. Double your area, you can have a house that's twice the size, you can knock the house and grow vegetables on it, you can start a business in it. It gives you freedom and opportunities, and this is also will make these locations attractive to certain people that have initiative or would like a much larger house for half the price. So that it's something that they've been doing in Detroit in some of the project areas, where to resist the flight of population, rather than always necessarily knocking underused houses that were causing antisocial problems, they gave them to the person next door if they wanted it, and oftentimes they ended up renting it out to people who would not otherwise have gone into those areas. The other issue is that there's a huge number of houses in the countryside, as we all know, that are scattered around in locations that are not desirable on any respect other than possibly politically to secure the vote. That's very necessary coming up to election time. But many of these houses have been built at very low standards, and even since 2000 the building regulations have pushed up energy standards by over 30%. So many of those houses that were built in the 70s would be less than half the energy efficiency of current building stock. In some cases, knocking those houses to rebuild more efficient houses doesn't make much sense, because you're throwing away the resource of that house. But when you have other underutilized resources of houses that people can be offered as an option, move them to town where there's better transport links, where they're integrated with services, where they're not polluting the groundwater, where many of the issues of rural isolation and issues other than the aesthetic ones of living in the countryside can be dealt with. and then allow the existing housing locations to revert back to farmland, or possibly to be afforested to assist with our extremely low levels of afforestation. There are also a number of estates that are completely vacant, that are not occupied to any extent, and that are quite largely complete but not available to, that there's no market to sell them, or they're stuck in financial quagmires where they can't be released for the market. In these situations, there's also a huge demand for other properties. So for instance, there's a dire shortage of schools, and there doesn't seem to be much possibility of coping with the demand that's currently there for school buildings. A housing estate would very easily be turned into classrooms. You've external circulation between your classes. If there's a population boom due to hit in primary schools in the next 2 years, so possible short-term solution, use the housing estates for schools until the bulge has passed through the system, and then perhaps after the 10-year life cycle or so of NAMA, we might have a situation where the property market has restored to the extent where there is a market for some of these houses again. Sorry, that one shouldn't be there. Or that one. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way, that's fine. I'm just blown away by these ideas.